time for questions and answers. Okay, first of all, wow, I love your presentation so much. So interesting thinking how they connect. First of all, why are we talking about the Global Peace Index? Has anybody heard about the Global Peace Index? Oh, fantastic. And I am a master's student at ICU, and I'm studying how we can incorporate more global issues into the classroom. So first point, like Luke said, I am all about not making content matter infantile. So this is something real and something that we use. And another connection to Luke's presentation was the Institute for Economics and Peace, who produces this annual report. What have they asked us to do? Translate it to Japanese. And so what are we working with our students on? Translating this. So I just love this. And second of all, Sashi's presentation, right now there's 3 classes at ICU, International Christian University, that are content-based global issues classes, and one of them is intercultural communication, so I love what you had to say. So I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sarah Sanderson. I'm from Holland, Michigan. I recently got here this August, and I'm with a program called the Rotary Peace Fellowship. I don't know if you've heard of Rotary International. It's a big service-based worldwide organization, and they offer fellowships each year for people in any field to pursue studies in peace and conflict resolution. Tokyo is one of the bases for that. So I'm from an education background, and I'm studying how to combine language education and peace and kind of global education. So I'm doing that at ICU. And I'm also a Global Peace Index Ambassador, which is a new program started by the Institute for Economics and Peace, which also produces the Global Peace Index, which I'm going to be talking about today. So my goal actually today is to give you a brief picture of what the Global Peace Index is, so I can tell you about how we've been using it in the classroom, okay? So I'm going to go kind of fast. It's a huge and complex kind of report that makes a worldwide ranking of all the countries in the world according to their relative peacefulness. So it's a lot of information, but I'm hopefully just going to give you a picture so you can see how we're using it. All the slides and information and handouts and activities, I'm very, very willing and open to share, so just let me know. So this Global Peace Index Ambassador Program is a new program, so, and this is a partnership between Rotary and the Institute for Economics and Peace. They chose 135 of us from all around the world. We participated in webinar trainings to understand how this index was calculated. So I'm not an expert, but I have had a little bit of training in how this was calculated. And then the goal was to disseminate this, so at conferences, and I also go around Tokyo and do these activities and presentations in high school and in university classrooms. So what am I talking about? The Institute for Economics and Peace is an independent, not-for-profit think tank dedicated to building a greater understanding of the key drivers and measures of peace and to identifying the economic benefits that increased peacefulness can deliver. Okay? Nonprofit measures a lot of different indicators to try to see what's working and what's not in terms of peacefulness. They are based in Sydney, DC, and Mexico. Let's see, it's here. And so one of its main goals is to try to kind of remove this idea of peace as this utopian bliss and to make it a more tangible measure, right? So we tend to think of societal progress in terms of economic growth reflected by GDP, but the IEP wants us to recognize more about how we can view social development, including measures of well-being and peace as kind of a measure of progress. So ultimately they want to develop an evidence base to measure and understand the drivers of peace and to show that peace not only has a moral value, but a financial value, right? Which can be a big driver in government. So why do we measure peace? Well, first of all, we don't really understand a lot about peace. There is so much money and programs and studies about conflict and war, right? But not a lot about peace. Peace is very complex, multidimensional, right? Data advocacy, it allows us to identify gaps in data and where there needs to be additional data collection. And there's a huge social and economic impact of if we can measure and understand peace better. So we know that violence can impede social development and have a long-lasting, devastating impact on countries experiencing conflict. So the big one is that violence costs a lot of money, right? So the global cost of violence is about 14.3 trillion, right? Violence costs 13.4% of the world GDP. Country estimates, 162 countries, 15 dimensions measured. This is an increase of 15.3% from 2008. This ranking, this index of the measurement of peace, was started in 2008, so a lot of the data can show some different trends and what's changed, which is really interesting. To put this number in perspective a little bit, if this number were reduced by 10%, it would free up 1.43 trillion US dollars. That is the equivalent of 10 times the official development assistance and 6 times the value of the bailouts for Greece. Right? Huge amount of cash, a lot. So, I don't think I need to convince people in this room why we measure peace, but the most interesting thing about this index is how we do it. How is peace measured? Which, yeah, super, super interesting and very complex. A lot of different dimensions to this. So, the first thing you need to know is, if we're talking about how we measure peace, we need to talk about what is peace. How is peace defined? And the definition that the Institute for Economics and Peace uses is negative peace and positive peace. And the person who developed this, his name is Johann Galtung. He's called the father of peace studies, who's incidentally speaking at ICU this weekend, which is super exciting. And negative peace, this is the definition that this GPI index uses in its calculation. So negative peace is the absence of direct violence and the absence of the fear of violence. Okay? So this is what this index is going off of. Ultimately, they would like to promote and learn more about the drivers for positive peace, which is the attitudes, institutions, and structures that sustain peace. Right? This does not exist yet, but hopefully at some point, the positive peace index. Okay. So this, like I said, this index started in 2008, and it's released annually every June. So it's actually being released next week, extremely exciting. So the 2015 version will be released. Like I said, it ranks 162 countries according to the relative states of peace. And the measurement is calculated using 23 different indicators. And I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of them. And it's weighted on the 1 to 5 scale. Okay, so countries that are the most peaceful are the 1. Developed by the IDP, and it's guided and overseen by a panel of international experts. Data is collected and collated by the Economist Intelligence Unit. So it's interesting, the data is collected about between countries and also in country, okay? Just a brief introduction to some of these indicators. What are they looking at when they measure peace? Well, 6 of those 23 indicators are measures of ongoing domestic and international conflict, including things like intensity of organized internal conflicts, relationship with neighboring countries, number of deaths from conflict. 10 of those 23 indicators are measures of societal safety and security, like number of refugees and IDPs, impact of terrorism, homicide, and incarceration rates. And then finally, 7 of those 23 indicators are measures of militarization. So military expenditure, number of armed service personnel, ease of access to getting a gun, for example. Okay, and so you get this report, there's this ranking, but the most interesting thing that we use with our students, and maybe the most interesting thing for you, is they come up with a map, okay? So this is a map reflecting the 2014 Global Peace Index. Countries in the green have very high rates of relative peacefulness, and going down to countries in red. Super, super interesting to look at, and this is an interactive map, so each country you click on brings up the detailed information, okay? So, I mean, a lot of it, you kind of look and you think, wow, look at the US, it's yellow. That's what a lot of the international students say right away. Well, how much does the US spend on defense? How easy is it to get a gun in the US? How many people do we have in prison? Right? So there's a lot of things taken into account in peacefulness. So what we like to do with students is They're obviously most interested in this kind of thing if you can make it personal. So where have you been? Where do you want to go? Where do you have friends? Where do you live? Let's look at Japan. So Japan ranks 8 out of 162, pretty good, right? And so you can take all these indicators and look at them individually, or you can kind of just get a general look. Okay, so some of the key findings. The average level of country peacefulness has remained the same since last year. This is 2014-2015. 81 countries became more peaceful while 78 countries deteriorated. So what happened? Well, lots of internal conflict, terrorist activity, and a decrease in UN peacekeeping funding. Counteracting these falls were improvements in homicide rate, in external conflicts fought, and political instability. So you might ask, well, this past year, what was the least peaceful or most peaceful? Syria was the world's least peaceful nation, and Iceland was the most peaceful. Okay? You can see the countries that showed the largest improvement and the largest drop. So there's lots of things that are very easily accessible on the website. It's very clearly spelled out some of the big trends. There's many graphs that we use with our students too in terms of interpretation and describing and critical thinking. I'm not going to show them all to you today, but there are many on there, and to show some trends and growth in different aspects of the indicators shown. So, how have they used some of this information to talk about positive peace, or learning about, okay, well, if we know what we don't want, how do we know what we do want? How can we get there? So what creates peace? And something that we do with our students, even before we start talking about these kind of abstract indicators, is asking them what they think, right? So how would you measure peace, right? So when we talk about measuring positive peace, we use actual peace, so what I was talking about before, crime, suppression, military, and armed conflict, to make this index, our ranking of the countries. Positive peace is derived through statistical analysis of data sets, indices, and attitudes with the GPI to make a kind of a positive peace index. Not there yet, still working on it, right? Still going. So, what do they use to determine what makes a peaceful society? They looked at over 8,500 variables covering macroeconomy, social relations and attitudes, economic and social development, economic and social integration, the functioning and structure of government and external relations, and they came up with some kind of broad topics which closely match a lot of what university students will come up as well. These will sound, I think, very logical and common sense to you. So the attitudes, institutions, and structures that sustain a peaceful society, no surprise, are a well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relationships with neighbors, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, sound business environment. And something that we do with this whole concept of a global peace index to make it more relatable is we do this on a school level. So maybe before we introduce the GPI, we talk about peace within your school or peace within your classroom. And we make our own indicators about how to measure peace at your school, how to measure peace at another school, and then compare. And it makes this a lot more relatable. Okay, so why positive peace is transformational? It helps us know how we can create and sustain peaceful societies. It's actually making this concept empirical, something we can measure. It reframes the study of peace towards focusing on what works. It's a measure of societal resilience, and it creates an environment that leads to many other positive outcomes. So just some key messages before I talk about how we use it in the classroom briefly. Big message to take home, we're seeing a tale of two worlds with an increasingly inequality and peacefulness. We spend a lot of money on violence and a little on building peace in terms of energy and money. We have to shift the focus to positive peace, investing in prevention and building resilience. Right? So IEP has a big impact. I think now that you know about this, you'll start to see it, especially next week in the news. It's always covered. Lots have written about it. And so how do we use this in the classroom? How can you use this in the classroom? All of this is free, like I said. If you access Vision of Humanity, which is the communication platform of the GPI, they have the interactive map. Like I said, it's very well done. It's very clear, very easy to use. This map has very interactive features. You can pull up countries, you can compare them on the different indicators. This is that vision of humanity. You can see global rankings, also very interesting, so you can choose any indicator you want and see a ranking of all the countries. You can see peace at a country level like we did when we looked at Japan. And then you can click on any of the indicators and see the map actually change according to the different indicators, right? Like, this is probably access to guns, maybe, something like that. Okay, another very, very fantastic resource from this is on their official website, so economicsandpeace.org, is they have 4 ready-made education modules available for free, and they're very good. So they have some readings and activities based on understanding peace, peace and sustainability, education and peace, and economics and peace. And I'd say you can use it like upper high school level to university level. So lots of activities and things to do in your class available there. And here are some of the things that we've done. So brainstorming about what peace is and how to measure it, dividing up those 8 peace indicators, those bubbles that I showed you, dividing those up and then researching them and then presenting those to the class, making our own school peace index. And then we also did an activity where students represent countries in the Global Peace Index at a Global Peace Summit, describe their ranking, and then come up with some different ways to improve their ranking, right? So they propose one peace initiative for their country. This Vision of Humanity, every year they produce about a 3-minute video explaining the Global Peace Index in a very, very graphic and easy to understand way. It's a really good resource to use if you're introducing this to your students. We've also developed a lot of reading activities or kind of web search activities that I'm happy to share. So using the website, just kind of some basic knowledge, making sure you understand some of the basic concepts. This is going off their website. And then going off some of the readings that are published, like in the Times or something like that. Students have to fill in which country they think is the most peaceful without reading, and then doing some pre-reading activities like making sure we know where certain countries are in the world. And then there's a reading, an actual reading, right, about the Global Peace Index, and then some comprehension questions. So those are some things that we've really enjoyed doing. This is something that we just started this fall, and it's been really fun, really successful. Students like it because it's not easy and it's very real. So I think that's been something that I've definitely enjoyed about it. So I'll definitely be happy to answer any questions, and like I said, I'm happy to send you and share anything or give a presentation at your school.